here in the Himalayas are so fortunate that our absolutely beautiful, vibrant, and rich culture is alive. In Kathmandu Valley, our communities, for the most part, have continued to do what their ancestors have always done. Every morning, bathe their neighborhood deities, they feed them, they adorn them. Our Poba and Tanka artists, they continue to approach painting as a sacred ceremony, chanting mantras as they paint layer after layer. We are naturally so rich. Every other foothill, we could say, there are different ethnic tribes following their own distinct cultures. But it's not always going to be this way. In fact, it's already changing. Some years ago, I was filming a documentary on the illicit trafficking of art from Nepal. And even when I was filming, the gods and goddesses would go missing. But the interesting part, for good or bad, the very next day, locals would replace that missing deity with a stone or a rock and continue worshipping. That's our culture. You can take our objects away, but you can't take away our beliefs, our culture. And though I would never condone the stealing of our gods, I raise this point only to emphasize how deep-seated our heritage and our values are. Now, heritage, both tangible and intangible, is something I never want to quantify because to me it is invaluable, of course, and it is what makes us us. It is what gives us our identity. It's been there for thousands of years, and we must do everything to continue to preserve it, ensure it lasts forever. But just like everything else in life, there's an economic reality to heritage as well. How do you convince the Newari family, for instance, who lost their homes in the earthquake, to not opt for the cheaper, the more durable, and perhaps not as aesthetically pleasing and go a version of a renovation, but then go for the original style? How do you tell a family in Mustang to not break down their mud homes, even though because of climate change, you've got rainwater seeping through every season through their living rooms? So this is what we are here to discuss, this dichotomy, this constant debate between preservation versus development, and finding, hopefully, the middle path. And to look at culture as capital, as something we have been so fortunate to inherit and must do everything to preserve by making it a sustainable endeavor. So Laxmi, I want to begin with you because in some ways you are a living example of our living heritage, because the rest of us can comment and analyze and observe, but you actually live in the beautiful mountains of Mustang, where not only development, but also climate change is making preservation difficult. So what has your experience been of trying to preserve what's there? And secondly, why is heritage so important to you?
Hello. Thank you, Sumnima ji, for the question. Well, being born and grew up in small mountain communities, we have seen all those heritage, cultural, as well as rituals happening around those heritage. And seeing all these things, I feel that we need to preserve all those things because we have, at a modern development, climate change are destroying our cultures. Just like one example I would like to give, which is in the past, in few years, not a past too long, but there is we have a wedding ceremony takes place in the horses. But now these are being completely replaced by the jeeps and the motorbikes, which is a sad part for us to seeing all this ruining our cultural means. And so being in Mustang, I feel that it is my duty to safeguard my identity and my community's heritage assets. So that's why I'm at the moment trying to document, trying to collect the oral histories of the local communities on the rituals, festivals, and the languages, and in personal level as far as possible. Along with this, I also run a small hotel called Donald's, where we have stories to tell about happy meals. So which there's lot of things attached together. If you happy meals, why we call it happy meals? Happy meal is the things which makes lots of things happy. Now, the Happy Meals contains of yak burger, potatoes fries, vegetable salad, and the local berry sibokthon juice, which now when you talk about this, we are like lots of things connected is now the meat patty is made from local yak, which is nutritional value. And then we have things like bun are made from local wheat, which are grinded in 15th century water mill. And we have veggies, organically grown potatoes and veggies. And then also we have sibokthon juice, which is grown widely in the regions, and these are collected by the local women's. Now the story doesn't end here, because we have to tell the why happy, because the happy is it gives income generation for local farmers, local yak headers, and the women groups, which is economically benefit and financially secure. And the customers and the guests are happy because they got to eat nutritional food. And then 15th century's food is, watermill is preserved by community because of it is touristic product and it benefits local community. And as well as we McDonald owners benefit from leakage of economic on importing the food. Whereas along with this, there is also environment connections. It reduces footprint on saving the distance between food from farms to plate. So this is all benefiting as a system, and that is why I feel lots of stories are hidden inside our community, which are untold among the world, which I want to, before it became too late, I would like to preserve it and contribute my community in that way. So
one small initiative impacting so many livelihoods. Yeshey, Bhutan is one of the few examples that people always give when they try to cite an ideal example of how development should take place. For those of us who may not be so familiar with how Bhutan is doing it, what exactly is Bhutan's approach and how do you relate to this topic?
Good morning, Sumnima. Thank you for your question. For those of us in Bhutan, cultural heritage preservation is not a choice. It is a means of our survival. As you know, we're a very small country, just a speck on the map, and between just 700,000 people, sandwiched between two of the largest countries in the world, most populous countries, China and India. And if we don't make ourselves stand out, if we don't have a unique culture, national identity, then we can be easily swallowed up between our neighbors. And I think that's really one of the success stories of Bhutan, that for such a small country, we're able to stand out as a nation, be respected and known around the world. I mean, 700,000 is probably the population of a district in Kathmandu. And yet, it's actually because of our culture, our uniqueness, that we're able to do so. So cultural heritage is something which is very embedded in our daily lives, deeply rooted in our Buddhist traditions and culture. We have something called the Diglam Namja, which is a way of life for us, our etiquette, how we dress, how we speak, how we talk. We wear national dress every day to work. So it's a living heritage in Bhutan, and this is why we can set ourselves apart. And I think that's the reason why we really focus on culture. And the other thing is we have the concept of gross national happiness, which was conceptualized and promoted by our wise monarchs through the years. And that's a very noble development philosophy, people-centered development philosophy, which has 4 very important pillars. One is the economic development, one is environmental conservation, another is cultural conservation, and finally, good governance. I think these 4 pillars are very intrinsically linked and helps us to preserve our culture in a sustainable way without, and also develop economically without really exploiting our environment. So in a very balanced way of development. And I think that is really what makes us Sorry, I'm not expert on any of these topics, but as a Bhutanese and as a part of this living heritage, I shall be speaking today. And it's so okay.
The life.
Sorry.
The life.
Yeah, culture is a way of life for all of us, and these four pillars are all interdependent. To achieve culture preservation, we need also to. We must not forget that the economic livelihoods of the people have to be looked after. So I think we've done a great job in that. We have very good policies in place which are taking care of that. Many initiatives which I shall speak about later.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I just want to set the stage a little bit more so that everyone gets a sense of what everyone does. Mahima, you wear many hats, but today you're representing the Himalayan Heritage Hotels Fund. This was an initiative taken by the Himalayan Consensus back in 2017. If you could just give us a sense of what that is and how it's going and what you've learned in that process.
So the Himalayan Heritage Hospitality Fund, it's a confluence of several things we noticed, one of which was the loss of living heritage, which involves the intangibles, so not just monuments, but language and culture and know-how and skills. We see it all around us, including in our own families and our lives, but also broadly across Nepal, the loss of that kind of living heritage. At the same time, my background is in branding, and I see the rise and the value of unique, distinct culture for tourism. And being around Nepal, we see there are properties with potential. But these three seem to be here isolated conversations. We notice the loss of heritage and we say, oh, that's too bad. Somebody should do something about that. We see the global trends in tourism and we say, oh, we want more tourists. But it doesn't seem like the branding, distinctiveness, and the tourism guys are, I mean, there doesn't seem to be a living conversation between that. And then there are properties with potential who need, their gap is this bridge between what they have and what the world is looking for. And so really it was envisioned as a kind of bridge between these three worlds of brand and publicity, sustainable tourism, living heritage, and existing properties in Nepal. So that's really the kind of the backdrop on which the fund came to be. And there's been a lot of learning on that front. I think, first of all, we didn't realize how much even in our own minds these three have been isolated. We haven't correlated all of the data from all of these touch points of living heritage, Nepal, existing properties, brand, and broader global trends. And so there's been a lot of learning in seeing how do we bring that global knowledge to bear on properties here at a scale that's sustainable. So I envision at least another year of capacity building, of learning about local heritage and seeing what's a way to bring it to life on a global platform.
Yeah, and I want to talk about this dichotomy a little bit more, this preservation versus development. I recently met an American tourist who visits Namche quite often, and he was saying how he was so disappointed now that it was so different before, and now when he goes, he can get exactly what he used to get or can get now in Arizona, from your Oreos to your Gatorade. And so he said the vibe is gone. Now, on the one hand, you need to provide to tourists and make that kind of things available, but at the same time, you need to preserve that authenticity. So where do you find that balance? How do you deal with something like this, Laxmi?
Well, I think if we link between tourism and agriculture, then we can create a balance, because agriculture is something which binds culture, rituals, festivals alive, and also provide a healthy food to live in and healthy environment to breathe in. Whereas tourism provides you with income source, one economic, which when you blend together, it is like both the community are encouraged to do the local handicrafts or the local produce for the tourism needs, and this will benefit both. Combining these two will balance kind of economic status of the local communities, which will be the win situations to the development, of sustainable development for a long time. I believe that way.
Yeshey, how is Bhutan handling this? Because you have or for a long time have had a visionary leadership there and a government that, and it's a relatively small country, so you can control what happens there. And you've done it right. You mentioned gross national happiness, for example. There's so many layers to getting permission to build something. And you, as someone who's involved in the organic farming business and also in the hotel business, I mean, do you see this as an hindrance, or how can we look at it differently?
I think in Bhutan we've been blessed with good leadership and good policies, and GNH has really helped us in terms of guiding our development. So we have the GNH tools, all policies, all development activities, any big project has to go through a screening test, and there are like so many parameters which has to fulfill the GNH goal. So if it doesn't fulfill that goal, so then it doesn't get passed. So in that way, it's difficult to do something, but at the same time, we can be assured that what we do can be done in a sustainable way, in a balanced way, and we are guiding that kind of development. So we don't allow unwanted developments to take place, things that may have side effects. On one hand, may be able to generate a lot of income, but if it is polluting, if it affects your culture, then these are not permitted. So I think that's a very good way in which we are kind of handling the cultural preservation and the environmental preservation part. When you have a good policy in place and a good strong government in place to implement that, I think that's really the reason why we've been able to succeed.
So Mahima, in the absence in Nepal of a government like that in Bhutan, what can we do? What have you learned? How do you, I mean, the first step is to convince the community and then raise awareness and bring people together. What can we do as a society?
Well, I think given that our regulatory environment is, I'll say, maturing in the process, I think in the meantime, there is a stewardship role that private individuals need to take. And for me, that has meant a lot of learning, actually, that coming from kind of a business orientation and seeing that, oh no, it's not only my job to see the viability of a thing, but also the stewardship of a place and the people and the culture. So I think that's the first thing that, I mean, in the absence of a regulatory environment that mandates that, there is a bit more of a stewardship role needed from us, private individuals who are looking in this space. Because we see in community, I mean, just this week I met somebody who was saying there was this area, it was very well known for bird watching locally, but it was not valued very much. And so she did a lot of work to promote that, you know, to say it's amazing, we have all this diversity here, people should come, and people came. And as the economics of the place changed, the values of a place change, right? And so in the absence of stewardship, it became this place which is, again, another urban kind of nightmare with the big concerts and the lighting. And of course, the birds don't like that very much, right? So the very thing you're trying to preserve, somehow good intentions has proven inadequate, I think. And to me, that's a lesson and a reminder to be learners, that there is a long-term vision that we need, which involves community stewardship, environment, and not just business. So I think that there is a caution to me on this conversation about business sustainability in heritage, because it can be a victim of its own success, that it can undermine the very thing you're trying to preserve. So I think there is more collaboration needed than in the average business, more than just sustainability. I think stewardship is a key difference. If I may add.
Sure.
Yeah, if I may add, Mahima, besides regulation, which you talked about, and stewardship, I think the community awareness is so important, because the community must know why people value their place, like, you know, why the birds are coming. They need to know, be aware of the reasons. And I think if the awareness is there, and if you have, and if there's a strong leadership in the community, then we should be able to keep all these unwanted developments in check, because that is counterproductive for them in the long run. So doing things in a sustainable and maybe more I think approach is better, cautious approach.
So, what are some examples of where it has worked, where we have found the right approach? I mean, one way is to look at culture as capital, something that we have been so fortunate to inherit, and something we have to invest in constantly to maintain. You've all talked about the idea of our living heritage. That's what we're so proud of, and that in some ways is harder to preserve. It's easier to preserve a monument or a building, but then how do you, in this globalized, interconnected world, how do you preserve our way of life? So what has worked? What are some examples of where we've found that balance, Laxmi?
Well, it's like preserving is also like for financially, like local community has lots of rich cultures. Like they have we have like lots of monuments or buildings, which is like in 15th centuries. But then preserving those, we need a fund, and which is all one of the biggest challenges we feel, because this community are rich in their own ways of living lifestyles, of living heritage, cultures, rituals. But then when we talk about economic point of view, it's always we consider ourselves as a weak. So, but if we get a fund from the investors or someone willing to do, we have lots of resources to give them an outcome, such as like, I would like to say, we have cultures which are not portrayed to the tourism. At the moment in Mustang, we have only the landscape or trekking, etc. Culture events are highly not exposure to the tourist industry. So if we could express or promote those tourism, that is the one asset we get economically valuable, economic generations, and also there are so many stories hidden in Mustang, just like we have a treasure of hidden mine, gold, which doesn't mean that I'm saying we have a gold mine, but we have gold in a white gold, which we can sell as a white mountains, and we can sell our brown gold, which is also a sacred trans-Himalayan landscape, and we have a liquid gold, which I would like to say is our sacred rivers, and we also have solid golds, which I would like to say sacred ammonite fossils, which are called in Nepali saligram, and we have a source of those. And also these also one of the product product, and also we have mostly the living live gold, which is we called agro goods, locally traditional way produce chemical free organic goods and natural high altitude natural herbs. These are also one of the resources which we can use and caters the needs of growing tourism in the regions, because there is also possible that if the open border between India, Nepal and China, and there is the number of tourism is a great scope of number of tourism are growing. So that is a possible business point of view and investors, but as a community, we can provide all the requirement, but except the financial, if someone willing to invest, always welcome to Mustang.
Funding is always a major issue. Mahima, before we take questions, I think it all comes down to approach as well. Is there a business model we can come up with that assists sustainability of culture, but that is also profitable? Are there examples that you've seen in Nepal that seems to have worked?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of preface this by saying, I was saying to you earlier that this is kind of to me, it looks like parenting. There's no right way that is universal that will guarantee that you will raise good kids. And I think this is like that. Every place that we're looking at, it needs attention. It needs presence of mind to see what's there and what's valuable, and also what's a sustainable future for the community. So I think that's the first thing, that I think there is very much a unique approach needed for each case. Also, I think you're asking whether I've noticed, there are places within the valley where we have seen. There were years when everybody was tearing down their buildings and building just concrete blocks. And at the time, it made sense because it was difficult and expensive to renovate and to have modern lighting and plumbing in the old structures. And at some point, somebody went ahead and restored theirs, and everybody else around him noticed that that guy sells his rooms for a lot of money. Often, and there were periods here when hotels were not able to command those rates, right? And so that place started to do well, and then another place next door started to do the same thing. And now we see entire pockets in the valley where the communities themselves have come to the conclusion that heritage has unique value. And I think there's always a risk when we try to accelerate the process because it undercuts education. It undercuts a kind of maturity that's needed to see and appreciate what you have and to see it in the long haul rather than just the quickest possible money in your pocket. And I think that's a slow burn. I mean, to me, I have not seen very many ways of artificially accelerating this process that has been healthy in the long run for communities. So I think there is very much a need for a longer horizon when we look at returns, when we look at even approach and models, which is different from business. In business, we do tend to think slightly shorter term, but also often if a thing is viable, you become at a next stage to look at the longer haul. Whereas in heritage, what's lost is lost, and it's tragic, I think.
Yes.